If I were to ask you what you think 3 of the most successful video game franchises of all time were, you might throw out a few different answers. Maybe FromSoft Soulsborne titles, Mario, GTA, Pokemon, FIFA, or even Sonic. And honestly, those answers wouldn't even be wrong at all. However, there are 3 in particular that for some reason seem to always come back into the spotlight. Minecraft, Fortnite, and Call of Duty. Although you could call that one a stretch, honestly. In this video, I'll be attempting to understand why these games refuse to die and how it's killing them. Now, these games all share 2 specific traits that I'll be touching on. I'll be exploring the second one later. To start off, the main trait these games share in my opinion is nostalgia. Now, you guys aren't stupid. I'm sure you all know what nostalgia is, but fuck it. Why not throw in the definition so we know exactly what we're talking about? Nostalgia. A sentimental longing or wistful affection for a period in the past. Great. Now that's out of the way, I figure I'd first talk about the game I most recently made a video on. Thanks for the support on that one, by the way. Minecraft. Now, Minecraft is one of those games that hasn't ever truly died in my opinion, but it definitely isn't anywhere near its peak popularity-wise. Although there has been some little spikes here and there, and the recent ARG surge is lighting a spark. However, that's still nothing compared to Minecraft's monopoly over the internet during the early 2010s, of which a big contribution was thanks to the big YouTubers at the time, like Team Crafted, fucking miss them bro, Stampy, Prime Atlanticraft, and DanTDM, just to name a few. Now, it's been years since that time, and most of those creators have moved on to newer things, only occasionally jumping back on the game that made them in the first place to please OG fans. But what about the actual game? While there's always been new content being added to Minecraft, a lot of them in recent times have been quite underwhelming and haven't done much to shake up the gameplay loop. And yes, I know they've gotten better recently, okay? Riding a ghast is fucking sick and flying with a spear is tough as fuck, so I better not see anyone hop into my shit for that. Anyway, despite all that, there always comes the infamous 2-week Minecraft phase. You know, that phase where you and your boys play and it's all peaceful, you know, it's a fun time. And what I think makes this phase so appealing to all of us is that it allows you to reminisce on the days when we were all kids and didn't have any, you know, adult responsibilities. Briefly living in those moments again. You know, no worries or stress, just you and your boys chilling on Minecraft. And this is a big part of what keeps bringing us back to the game in my opinion. Well, you know, that is until some dumb cunt murks your fucking dog and the server turns into World War III, after which it ends, and the game goes back on cooldown for another year, while you and your boys spend your time playing $7 multiplayer indie games on Steam that you all swear you're gonna play properly, but only play for a night and then fucking forget about it. Fuck me. Speaking of multiplayer games, this brings us to the next 2 games, with the first being Fortnite. Now, in my opinion, if you told me that Prime Fortnite was the greatest game of all time, I wouldn't even call that a crazy take. During those Chapter 1 and even those early Chapter 2 days, it felt like Epic couldn't miss and that the momentum they built couldn't be stopped. Every update felt like an event, and the actual live events felt like history you were alive to see. Now, that might be glazing a bit, but you get the idea. However, they started to drop off slowly but surely, and now the game is at its lowest state in its history, or at least to my knowledge. Especially since Donald Mustard, the now ex-Chief Creative Officer at Epic Games, you know, the guy responsible for making the amazing live events we used to get back in the day, left the studio. Now, similarly to Minecraft, Fortnite also holds that same nostalgic effect. I still have mates that around every 6 months or so feel like hopping back on just to see what's going on with the game. Now, were all of our reactions to what's new positive? Fuck no! But regardless, the want to play and recreate what was is there. Now, Fortnite isn't just the revolutionary game that brought the gaming industry the Battle Pass system, but it's also the game that highly popularized the use of collabs with other popular brands and franchises to steal more money. I mean to attract players old and new, yeah, whatever. I mean, who doesn't love that new Kim Kardashian collab, am I right? Fortnite's first ever collab. Let's go. Anyway, these collabs always bring some attention back to the game. I mean, it still manages to get people playing again, even if that's just for a short time. Since Fortnite started this trend, many different games have employed this same strategy, for better or for worse, including Minecraft. But the final game of today may be the worst offender of this, failing to even do it well half the time. Of course, I am talking about Call of Duty. Now, COD has had a dwindling player base over the last few years, with frustration and disappointment in the games only growing each year. Now, the last time a COD game had a great reception to my memory was Modern Warfare 2019. That was 6 years ago. Since then, the only time you ever see COD re-emerge into the public eye is either because of a new collab or they added a gun from a previously loved part of the franchise. COD also has another reason to why players still stick around, aside from nostalgia and collabs in my opinion, and it's a bit of a sad one. The other reason is because players are just simply waiting for the games to get good again and re-spark that fun arcade shooter that was loved so much. Bit harsh, I know, but I mean, am I wrong? All you ever hear every new COD release is how people want old COD back, and I don't blame them, but the reason is still there. And part of that is nostalgia, sure, but the games back then also just felt like less of a clusterfuck to play, and were games you could just get on and enjoy and not have to sweat your balls off to even have a chance in a match. Regardless, all these games hold a lot of nostalgia with people, and I think anyone should agree with this. But having your game rely on just nostalgia isn't enough, and that may seem obvious, but to these companies it might not be. For example, Fortnite brought back the OG Chapter 1 map and weapons during late 2023. And was that shit peak? Fuck yes, but it still proves my point that these companies are trying to attract using nostalgia rather than making the current content good. There's also COD that brought back Rebirth Island in 2024, applying the same principle. The people behind these games need to realize that they should be focusing on making new content for the current game good, rather than trying to constantly revert the game to give old players a temporary high again. Embrace the old while focusing on the new. That should be how they approach this in my opinion. The new Ghast riding mechanic in Minecraft is a small but good example of this. It respects the Ghast and its original intent, but adds a new functionality that isn't a huge overhaul of the Ghast, but still is enough to feel like a big difference in gameplay. So look, my point is, I think games should learn from what the mistakes Minecraft, Fortnite, and COD have made, and learn to stop leaning on nostalgia and collabs and just focus on making their current game good, while respecting their roots of course. But that's just my opinion. And with that said, that's all from me. But if you guys have any suggestions for a video, don't be afraid to throw them down in the comments below. And with that said, happy doom scrolling.